A Gittin Erev Shabbos, my holy sisters and brothers. Great to be learning with you on a Friday, Yom Shishi. Let's light up the darkness. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Bill in Mid-Missouri, Sharon, still on the road in Las Vegas. Joe in the Inland Empire, Nancy, still at work. It's a good thing work is fun. Amen. Lucy in Minnesota, Shandora in the Bronx. Leona in Illinois. Wait a minute, skipped on me. Richard in Brighton, Renee in Indiana, Leona in Illinois, Paul in the Great Northwest. Bella in Florida, Gordo in Scotland. There must be Friday. And Gordo, you'll be happy to hear that on Sunday, it's also going to be at noon Pacific this week, same time as today, because later that afternoon on Sunday, our son, our youngest, is graduating from high school. Soon to be empty nesters, Sal and Nina. But at any rate, we've got family in town, graduation on Sunday afternoon, so we'll do class Sunday at noon Pacific. The Friday time also for Sunday this week. And we'll put an announcement about that on the Facebook page. Where was I? Gordo in Scotland. Belle, shalom from kind of the high seas as we are in Alaska on a cruise. That must be fun. Have a great time. And over there on the YouTube side, Alice says shalom. Marjorie in Georgia. Lynn in North Texas. Welcome, everybody. Today we are completing, with God's help, Chapter 2 here in Tractate Gittin, the 19th volume of the Talmud. Our daf is Chaf Daled, page 24. We're actually continuing our discussion of Mishna number 7 here in Chapter 2. And this concerned that although certain women, because of their tight and somewhat fractious relationships, co-wives, a daughter-in-law and her mother-in-law, who were the other ones? Her mother-in-law, her mother-in-law's daughter, her rival wife, and her Yavama and her husband's daughter, that certain women were not deemed credible to come and testify as the sole witness that a man had died overseas, and thereby allow his widow to remarry. Although we will accept a single witness's testimony, we won't accept a witness's testimony if she has that particular relationship to the widow. And so she'd have to wait for some other witness to come forward. Recall that we never allow anything by the witness, the testimony of a single witness, except in cases like this, which is a leniency for the woman so that she will not become an aguna, a stranded wife who is not able to remarry even though her husband may be dead. Why not women with these relationships to her? Because they might have, some ill will toward her. And they could really, do a number on her if they say, oh, I saw that your husband died, and then it turned out that he didn't die. And meanwhile, the widow remarried, and then that second marriage would be a sham. So this is really to protect the woman, that we don't allow these particular women with those relationships to the widow to be the sole witness testifying that her husband had died. Nonetheless, says the Mishnah here in Tractate Gittin, those women are deemed credible to be the agent of delivery for a bill of divorce, right? Because the stakes are much lower. Since there's other, there's the get itself, which they are bringing, which of course is further evidence that the husband does want to divorce her. There were witnesses when the husband created the get. So there's a lot of other corroboration that could go on here. And that's why, though we won't believe these women to be the sole witness that the husband died, we will allow them to be the agent of delivery for the get. So continue our discussion of this Mishnah. About a few lines down from the top of page 24a. Now, the Mishnah teaches that the woman herself may bring her own bill of divorce and from overseas and state that it was written and signed in her presence. And this begs the obvious question. The Gemara asks, why does she need to bring it and testify that it was written and signed in her presence? With regard to this woman who is bringing her own bill of divorce, well, once that bill of divorce from her husband reaches her hand, she is divorced. You know, when an agent of delivery brings a get from overseas and says, your husband wrote this get in my presence, it was signed in my presence, now I'm delivering it to you, and now you become divorced with it, okay, it makes sense. But if the woman is saying, this bill of divorce was written in my presence and signed in my presence, and now she's holding it, so it must be that she received it, so at that moment, she became divorced. What does she need to come here into the land of Israel, for example, from overseas, and say this bill of divorce was written in my presence and signed in my presence? She's already divorced. What is the purpose of this? And okay, we believe her that it was written in her presence and signed in her presence, but why do we even need to raise this question at all? Once she received the get, she's divorced, isn't she? Rav Huna says our Mishnah is referring to one who says to his wife, you will be divorced through it, the get, only in the presence of such and such a court. And the divorce does not take effect when she receives the bill of divorce because the husband made a condition that this bill of divorce will take effect when you receive it in the presence of such and such a beis din, right? A rabbinic court. The husband wants it properly recorded that he's divorcing her. He wants it presented in front of such and such a court so that it will be publicized and everyone will know that they're divorced and it's ratified, and he wants no issues later. Okay, not bad. That would be a good reason to do it this way. He says the husband said you will be divorced through this get only in the presence of such and such a court. And the divorce does not take effect when she receives the bill of divorce. Now the Gemara asks, ultimately, once she arrives there to that court, okay, so then she's immediately divorced through the get. And as she has fulfilled the condition set forth by her husband, according to Rav Huna. Why then would it be necessary for her to bring the bill of divorce and testify it was written in my presence and signed in my presence? The condition was, this is your get when you bring it before such and such a court. What difference does it make that it was written in my presence, signed in my presence, that she has to make that statement? So rather, Rav Huna bar Manoach said in the name of Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, this Mishnah is referring to a case where he said to her, when you arrive there, place the bill of divorce on the ground and take it. Consequently, the divorce does not take effect immediately upon her arrival, and now it starts to seem a little bit more similar to a case where there was an agent of delivery who brought the bill of divorce to the woman from a place overseas where the husband had it written or wrote it himself, and the agent of delivery has to testify. That was our first Mishnah in this tractate. It was written in my presence and signed in my presence. She's acting as the agent of delivery for her own get, but the husband instructed that when you get there, right, it has to be delivered to you. It has to be given to you. So one way to do that, perhaps, is that when she arrives there, she puts the bill of divorce on the ground. It's like she's delivered it in front of the court. And now she picks it up, and it becomes her get. She has to make that statement, written in my presence, signed in my presence. And now she's got it in her hand. She has acted as both the agent of delivery and the recipient of the get via placing the get on the ground in front of the particular court that the husband specified. Does this work? No, it does not. What's the flaw? The Gemara challenges this. If that is so, isn't it like the case where he said to his wife, take your bill of divorce from off the ground? And Rava says, if a husband says to his wife, take your bill of divorce from off the ground, then it is as though he said nothing. What did the Torah specify when a husband writes a scroll of severance, meaning the get, and he gives it to her. So that either he hands it to her, or he appoints an agent to hand it to her, or he places it in her domain as a means of delivery. And there's various ways that he can deliver it to her. But when he says to her, pick it up off the ground, no. He has not given it to her, and it is as though he said nothing at all, and they are not divorced. Rather, our Mishnah should be explained as follows. This is referring to a case where the husband said to his wife, be my agent for delivery of the get until you arrive there at the Beis Din, at the rabbinic court. And when you arrive there, be your own agent of receipt and receive your bill of divorce as an agent. So it's odd, right? The husband is now saying to her, be the agent of delivery, be my agent to deliver the bill of divorce to the court, and then appoint yourself to be the agent of receipt. Now the Gemara challenges, but the agency has not returned to the husband. In other words, the first agency where she acted as the agent of delivery has not ended, because an agent must have the ability to complete his involvement in the act and return to the person who appointed him and inform him that the agency has been carried out. That's a proper agency. Now that's interesting, by the way, because we have a tradition, I've talked about it here before. It's a beautiful little tradition that if your friend is going on a journey, they're traveling overseas, they're going to Israel, they're going to Europe, they're going to Africa, wherever they're going. So you give them $1 and say, be my agent to give this dollar to charity, to somebody who needs it at the other end of your trip. Why do we do that? Because somebody who is involved in the performance of a mitzvah has a little bit of extra protection around them, a little bit less likely that they're going to be hurt in any way. So you do this as a beautiful little gesture to your friend to give him an extra measure of protection when he's going on a journey. It's always a little bit dangerous to travel. So you give him that $1, right? And he's now involved in a mitzvah that he is an agent for the delivery of charity. And when he gets to the other end of the journey, he's got to give that $1 away to charity. And we've had that teaching many times, right? Sometimes you even give him $2. Here's your $1 to give when you reach the other end of the journey. Please give it to someone then. And then and the second $1 is when you return, give it to someone to charity, give it in charity to someone here on your return trip. Now what we're learning about this law of agency, which applies beyond just the law of the get, is that when you're appointed to do an agency for someone, part of that agency is to report back that you completed the job. If you're unable to complete the job and report that you completed the job, then that is not a valid agency. It has to be the kind of agency where you have the ability to finish the job and report that you finished the job. So what's the problem with this agency here where the husband said, okay, you're my agent of delivery of your get, and then when you get there, appoint yourself as the agent of receiving to receive your get. What's wrong with that? Right? So an agency is not complete unless the agent has returned and completed. In other words, the first agency where she acted as the agent for delivery has not ended, because an agent must have the ability to complete his involvement in the act, return to the person who appointed him, and inform him that the agency has been carried out. In this case, once she arrives at the court, her agency ends when she assumes the role of the recipient of the bill of divorce. And her involvement does not end. Therefore, so let's read that again. An agent must have the ability to complete his involvement in the act, return to the person who appointed him, and inform him that the agency has been carried out. In this case, once she arrives at the court, her agency ends when she assumes the role of the recipient of the bill of divorce. But her involvement does not end. Therefore, the appointment of the agent itself is deficient, and the divorce should not take effect, right? If he appointed another person, this is my bill of divorce for my wife. Your job is to give it to her, right? But now in this case, the husband instructed her, you are going to be your own agent. When you get there, right, appoint yourself the agent of receiving, right? What did he say exactly? Be my agent for delivery of the bill of divorce until you arrive there. And when you arrive there, be your own agent for receipt and receive your bill of divorce as an agent, right? His wording was a little weird. Could he have said, be my agent of delivery to deliver the get, and then deliver it to yourself as the wife so that you are now divorced? But that's not what he said. He said, you are my agent of delivery, and then when you get there, appoint yourself an agent of receiving. Whose agent is she at that point? She is her husband's agent for the delivery, and apparently he is her husband's agent for receiving on behalf of her. But she cannot be the husband's agent for receiving the get. She could appoint her own agent to receive the get, only according to some opinions, not according to all. But this word salad from the husband is what makes it an agency that cannot be finished, and that's why it's deficient, right? Therefore, the appointment of the agent itself is deficient, and the divorce will not take effect. Rather, the Mishna should be explained like this. The husband said to her, be an agent for delivery until you arrive there at the court, and when you arrive there, appoint an agent for your receipt on your behalf and give him the bill of divorce, right? She's acting as his agent for delivery. Apparently, because she's acting in that capacity, she can't receive the get herself. So she, as the wife, has to appoint someone to be her agent for receiving the get that she can, as her husband's agent, can hand it to. And then that person can hand it to her, and then that will complete the process of divorce, and she'll be divorced at that moment. Now, the Gemara says, this works out well according to the one who said, a woman can appoint an agent to receive her bill of divorce from the hand of the agent of her husband, right? He can appoint an agent to deliver. She, as the wife, can appoint an agent to receive. And it's like basically his lawyer can talk to her lawyer, right? Her agent can talk to his agent. They can have their people meet each other, as it were. Now, according to some opinions, in fact, the majority, this is possible, but not according to all opinions. This works out well according to the one who said a woman can appoint an agent to receive her bill of divorce from the hand of the agent of her husband, and it is not required that she receive the bill of divorce herself. However, according to the one who says a woman cannot appoint an agent to receive her bill of divorce from the hand of the agent of her husband, then what can be said? So the Gemara answers, what is the reason of the one who said that the woman cannot appoint an agent to receive her bill of divorce from the agent of her husband? What is the reason for that? Because there is degradation of the husband in doing this, as he wishes to give the bill of divorce directly to the woman and not to an agent. And here the husband is not particular about the matter, as he instructed her to do so, right? I mean, you might say that we don't want husbands to have to be able, we don't want a husband to be put in the position of giving the bill of divorce to her agent rather than to her. It's an odd argument when we're saying that, well, the husband already appointed an agent to be the deliverer. How is he degraded when the deliverer is met with an agent of the wife who says, okay, deliver it to me. What is the one called who appoints an agent? It's not the master, it's I'm not sure what the word is for that, right? The client, I guess, right? Right. So, he is the client of his agent and says, deliver to her. And then this agent is met with another agent who says, okay, the woman is my client. She appointed me as the agent. and, give me the receipt. How is the husband degraded by this? Okay, but some argue that way. It's not the majority. But according to the one who says that this law, that a woman cannot appoint an agent to receive the get from the agent of her husband, for a different reason. According to the one who says that this law is a decree due to the case of her courtyard that comes afterward, then what can be said? Now, some say that the reason for the law that the woman cannot appoint an agent to receive the bill of divorce from the agent of her husband is that there was a concern that if she were able to do this, then the courts may eventually allow her to be divorced by purchasing a courtyard into which her husband had placed the bill of divorce. In the latter case, the divorce does not take effect. The courtyard needs to be an extension of the hand of the woman into which the husband places the bill of divorce, which does not happen when he put it there before she purchased it. But it does not act as her agent. In any event, according to this opinion, the fact that the husband is not particular does not prevent this law from applying, as it does not depend on him. So the Gemara answers, according to this opinion, the Mishna should be explained as discussing a case when he said to her, be an agent for delivery of this bill of divorce until you arrive there. And when you arrive there at the court, appoint another agent for delivery and receive your bill of divorce from him. And if you wish, say that he said to her, be an agent for delivery until you arrive there. And when you arrive there, say before the court, it was written in my presence and it was signed in my presence. And you, the court, the husband says, and you should then appoint the court as an agent, and they will give the bill of divorce to you. Now, this is a big rigmarole. Because remember, the husband wants to divorce the wife, and she was there overseas with him when he wrote the get. He could have just handed it to her. They're done. But he made this stipulation. I want you to take this bill of divorce back to Israel so everyone should know that you're divorced. And you're going to be free to marry, and you're not going to have problems. In some respects, this is I don't know about a leniency, but it is of service to her. It makes sure, especially in the ancient world where they didn't have an online registry where everybody could look it up, right? And there wasn't the civil recorder of, marriage licenses and birth certificates, etc. By going this extra mile and making sure that a court was there to receive her and the get and witnesses, etc. Okay, so, it's solidly recorded. This marriage has ended. It might be that she's not very sophisticated about legalities, and he is, and he's making sure that she is going to be properly divorced so she can remarry and start her life over again. To some extent, he's doing her a good. But the problem is, because he made her his agent to deliver the get into Israel, so that she could receive it before this court, she can't also receive it because she's now acting as the husband's agent. But it's fine because she's going to take it to a court. So as the agent of delivery, she's going to give it to the court. And the court is going to act as her agent to receive it. But because she's bringing the get from overseas, even though she's the wife whom it's intended for, she will have to state, it was written in my presence and signed in my presence before the court. Then they receive it from her. Then they are witnessing that they themselves are giving it to her. Good divorce. Solid divorce. No one's going to challenge or question that divorce. And with that, we finish chapter 2. Now we open chapter 3 here in Tractate Gittin. We're at the bottom of page 24a with Mishnah number 1 of chapter 3. Any bill of divorce that was not written for the sake of a specific woman is invalid. Well, we've discussed this law over and over again. That's the whole point, according to, I believe it was Rabbah, who disagreed with Rava in saying the additional reason why the sages decreed that an agent of delivery who comes from overseas must state it was written in my presence and signed in my presence is because we can't be sure that the scribes overseas are aware of this law. This law, the subject of our Mishnah now, that a get must be written for a particular woman. right? It cannot be some off-the-shelf template, etc. And now we're going to get a little bit more into the nuances and particularities of that requirement. Any bill of divorce that was not written for the sake of a specific woman is invalid. How so? In a case of a man who was passing through the marketplace and heard the sound of scribes who write bills of divorce dictating the text to their students, right? So this experienced scribe is teaching neophyte scribes, apprentice scribes, how to write a get. And he's just using, a common name as an example. And so he's saying, so let us assume that Reuven of Pumbedisa, Reuven ben Shimon of residing in Pumbedisa, is divorcing his wife, Leah ben Avraham, residing in Pumbedisa, and we're going to write out a get for these people. And a guy is walking through the marketplace at the time that this scribe is teaching his apprentice scribes how to write a get. And he says, wow, that's funny. I reside in Pumbedisa. My name is Reuven ben Shimon. My wife, who I've been thinking I should really end this marriage, her name is Leah ben Avraham. And here they've just written a get with our exact names. Perfect. I'm going to take the leap and get divorced from my wife. And I bet since they made this get just as a teaching example, I could get it cheap. I don't have to have one particularly written for me and my wife. So I'll use that get. Can he use it? It's the same names, the exact same names of him and his wife and the town that they live in at the right date at the right time. It's a perfect get. Can he use it? No, absolutely not. It was not written for the sake of his wife. It was written as a teaching example. So in the case of a man who was passing through the marketplace and he heard the sound of scribes who wrote bills of divorce dictating the text to their students, this man so-and-so divorces his wife so-and-so from the place of such and such. And the man said, this is my name and that is the name of my wife. And he wishes to use this bill of divorce. This bill of divorce, this get is unfit for this divorce and he may not use it. Moreover, if one wrote a bill of divorce with which to divorce his wife, but later, he reconsidered and changed his mind. He didn't want to use it. He set it aside. And a resident of his town found him and said to him, you know what? My name is the same as your name, and my wife's name is the same as your wife's name, and we reside in the same town. Give me your bill of divorce, and I will use it to divorce my wife. So this get is unfit, and the second man may not divorce his wife with it. Moreover, now we're in 24b, if one had two wives, and the two wives had the same names, and he wrote a bill of divorce to divorce the older one, and then he changed his mind, he may not divorce the younger one with it, because it wasn't written for her sake. And moreover, if he said to the scribe, write a bill of divorce for whichever one of my wives that I will want to divorce, and I will divorce her with it, this bill of divorce is unfit for him to divorce either wife with it. So in no case, no matter how good the similarity is, no matter how applicable the get might be, if it wasn't written for the particular woman, is it going to work? Now, what do you think the Gemara is going to ask, right? We've been together through enough of these kinds of situations where they spelled out all these cases in kind of increasing, like, really? It won't even work in that case? Really? It won't even work in that case? And so why do they have to keep adding specifics? We learned in the first clause of our Mishnah, if it wasn't written for her sake, it is unfit. So why did the Mishnah list these additional cases? And now the Gemara will say, well, if we had only learned this, we might have thought that, but in fact, we'd be wrong, and so the Mishnah has to add the particular case. Gemara. The second clause of the Mishnah considers a case where one wrote a bill of divorce with which to divorce his wife, but later reconsidered, and a resident of his town with identical personal details found him and desired to use that bill of divorce. And the Gemara asks, but then with what case is the first clause of the Mishnah, where a man discovers that a scribe had written a bill of divorce with identical personal details to his own? With what case is that dealing? Isn't that also a case of a bill of divorce that was written for someone else? Why did the Tana of our Mishnah cite two seemingly identical cases? What was added with each case? And Rav Papa said, we are dealing with scribes who are practicing writing. The bill of divorce in the first case was written as an exercise. and not because someone requested that it be written. So you might have thought, okay, this one was written as an exercise, not really as a get, and that's why it doesn't work. But where it was actually written as a get, and it just happened to be for somebody with the same names, and now I'd like to use it for my divorce, maybe that will work because at least it was actually written to be a get and not as an exercise. So that's what the second clause adds. Now Rav Ashi said, and look, in the language of the Mishnah is also precise in this regard. You could learn the same lesson as it teaches in the first clause. Scribes were dictating to their students, and it does not teach scribes were reading names of an actual get that had been written. And the Gemara concludes, indeed, learn from this phrasing that this is the correct understanding of our Mishnah. Now, by employing the introductory term, moreover, when we go to the second paragraph of the Mishnah indicates that each case indicates an additional novelty beyond that of the previous case. And the Gemara asks, what novel element warrants the use of the term moreover? And the Gemara answers by quoting a Baraisa. The school of Rabbi Yishmael taught that not only this bill of divorce, which was written for practice and which was not written for the sake of an actual divorce, is unfit, but even that bill of divorce, which was written for the sake of an actual divorce between the husband and then he reconsidered and did not use it, even that bill of divorce is unfit to be used by someone else. And not only this bill of divorce, which was not written for the sake of his own divorce, is unfit, but even that bill of divorce, which was written for the sake of his own divorce, the husband wrote it for his own divorce, he just hadn't decided yet which wife he was going to divorce with it. Even that is going to be unfit because it wasn't written for a particular woman. Now the Gemara explains, what is the reason that a bill of divorce must be written for the sake of the woman who is being divorced? Okay, we've established this principle. Now what's the reason for that? It is stated in the verse that deals with divorce, Deuteronomy 24:1, right? Its full text is like this. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it comes to pass, if she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some unseemly matter in her, and he writes for her a scroll of severance, and gives it in her hand, and sends her out of his house. All these clauses add nuances to the law of the get. So what is the reason that he must write it for a particular woman? From that verse that we just read, Deuteronomy 24:1, it teaches the following. If the merciful one had written only, and he gives a scroll of severance in her hand, I would say that the verse serves to exclude this case of the first clause of the Mishnah when it was not done for the sake of severance, as the scribe wrote the bill of divorce merely as an exercise. However, if one wrote a bill of divorce to divorce his wife, but then reconsidered where it was done as an actual scroll of severance, it was done for the sake of divorce, I would say that it is a valid get, that it could be used by another man for divorcing his wife. And therefore, the merciful one writes in the Torah, and he writes, meaning the bill of divorce must be written exclusively for the sake of his own divorce. And if the merciful one had written only, and he writes, I would say that the verse serves to exclude this case mentioned previously where the man using the bill of divorce was not the one who wrote it. But if a man has two wives with the same name, so that it's the same man using the bill of divorce, and he's the one writing it, so then you could say that it is a valid bill of divorce when he changes his mind about divorcing the older one with the same name and uses it to divorce the younger one. Therefore, the merciful one writes in the Torah, and he writes for her, teaching that a bill of divorce must be written for the sake of a specific wife. So the Gemara asks, and why do I need the last clause of the Mishnah, which deals with a man who writes a bill of divorce for whichever wife he later chooses? It wasn't written for a particular one and then repurposed for the other one. He just wrote a bill of divorce that is going to work no matter which of his wives he wants to divorce because they have the same name. It wasn't written for one and going to be repurposed to the other. It was written for the one he chooses to divorce. Why doesn't that work? The earlier clause is made clear that one must write the bill of divorce for the sake of the woman who is being divorced. So the Gemara answers, this teaches us that there is no retroactive clarification, i.e., that one does not say that since he gave the bill of divorce to this wife, it is clarified retroactively that he had written the bill of divorce for her sake. Rather, he must write it for her sake from the outset. And he can't say, I have two wives with the same name. It's my bill of divorce. I'm the husband. I'm going to divorce one of them. It's going to be the one that I choose. And then it's clarified retroactively which one he actually wrote it for. No. At the time of the writing of the get, he has to have in mind which wife he wants to divorce with it. Now, the Mishnah teaches if he wrote a bill of divorce to divorce the older of his two wives and then he changed his mind, he may not divorce the younger wife with it, even though the two wives share the same name. The Gemara deduces from this, it is the younger one whom he is not able to divorce with it, but he is able to divorce the older one with it, as it was written for her from the outset. In other words, can you write a bill of divorce for your wife? Change your mind and say, you know what? I was hasty. I had this bill of divorce drawn up to divorce her with it, but I love her. I'm not going to divorce her. And then another few days goes by and he says, you know what? No, I am going to divorce her. Does the fact that he changed his mind now disqualify that get so that even later when he decides he will divorce her and he's going to use a get that he wrote for that woman, the same woman that he now wants to divorce, why can't he use it? It was a get that he wrote for her sake. Maybe he changed his mind, decided he wasn't going to do it. Okay, but that's just a pause in the process, isn't it? Why can't he use it later? Rava said, that is to say that one of two people with identical names, for example, Yosef ben Shimon, who live in one... Wait a minute, hold on a second. Yeah, Rava said, that is to say, right, and we're going to learn about this question of he changed his mind and then went ahead with it from this example that's given that he said he's going to give it to the older one and then he was going to give it to the younger one, which he's not allowed to do. So can we infer from that, but he can go ahead and give it to the older one, right, with that after that pause. So to answer that, Rava said, that is to say, that one of two people with identical names, for example, Yosef ben Shimon, who live in one city, can present a promissory note to claim a debt from others, and the borrower cannot claim that the promissory note was written for the other Yosef ben Shimon. And Abaye said to Rava, if that is so, then according to your reasoning from the earlier clause of the Mishnah that teaches that if one man requests a bill of divorce from another, saying my name is the same as your name, the bill of divorce is unfit for the second person to divorce his wife with it. Well, one could infer that the second man is the one who is not able to divorce his wife with it, but the first man is able to divorce with it, even though they have the same names. Are you going to say that because there's another guy in my town who has a wife who has the same name as my wife's name, that I can never get divorced from my wife because there might be confusion who actually got divorced? Am I stuck with her because someone else in my town has the same name as me and his wife has the same name as my wife? Are we going to say that? I mean, that sounds ridiculous, right? But didn't we say in the Mishnah in Baba Basra 172a, with regard to two people with identical names, neither of them can present a promissory note to the other, and another person cannot present a promissory note to them, as each one can deny that he is the one who owes the money. So here too, there is a concern lest the wife of the other use the bill of divorce to collect payment of her marriage contract, even though the bill of divorce was not written for her. Problem. So rather, what have you to say to explain how the first man can divorce his wife with this bill of divorce, and how can it be used as reliable proof of divorce? Well, one can say that the ruling of the Mishnah applies in a case where there are witnesses who observe the transmission of the bill of divorce and they confirm in court which of the two women was given the bill of divorce. And this Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, who holds that the presence of witnesses at the giving of the get is essential to its taking effect, so that there is no concern that the wife of this other couple, where both members of the couple have the same names as the members of this couple, to prevent that creating a problem, we have witnesses at the delivery of the get. Doesn't matter that there's another couple with the same names. Witnesses saw that it was this couple that got divorced with this document that happens to have the same names as that couple would use if they were getting divorced. Here too, in the case of two wives of the same man who have the same name, the ruling of the Mishnah applies in a case where there are witnesses who observe the transmission of the get. And this Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, and there is no concern that the other wife will claim payment of her marriage contract. Therefore, one should not deduce from this, as Rava did, that one of two people with the same name can present a promissory note to claim a debt from others. Rav says all of the bills of divorce that the Mishnah categorizes as unfit for use for divorce still disqualify the women who receive them from marrying into the priesthood, as she is considered a divorced woman with regard to the laws of marrying a priest, except for the first bill of divorce mentioned in the Mishnah. Okay, they changed the subject now. What they're saying is this bill of divorce that you wrote one for Tom wrote it for Mary, his wife, and then he changed his mind. I say, hey, my name is Tom. I have a wife named Mary. Give me your get. I'll give it to my wife. And then I give it to her. We are not divorced because this violates the principle that a get has to be written for the sake of the woman to whom it is intended. However, even though me, Tom, and Mary are not going to be divorced if we use that Tom and Mary's get, Mary is going to be considered a divorcee if we ever do, if for example, I die, right? And then she's a widow. So as a widow, she would be qualified to marry a Cohen, a priest, which as a divorcee, she cannot do. But because she received this flawed get, which did not create a divorce, nevertheless, because of the possibility that she might have been divorced by it, which she wasn't, because the Mishnah said she's not divorced with that get, nevertheless, receiving such a get makes her disqualified to marry a Cohen. Rav says, right, all these bills of divorce, which don't create a divorce, nevertheless disqualify the woman who receives them from marrying a Cohen, except for the first bill of divorce in our Mishnah, which was one written as a teaching exercise. That was never a real get, and so it wouldn't disqualify her from marrying a priest, according to Rav. Shmuel says, even that kind of a get, which was a teaching get, if some husband gave it to her, it would disqualify her from ever marrying a priest. And Shmuel follows his own line of reasoning. As Shmuel says, any place where the sages taught in a Mishnah an invalid bill of divorce, it indicates both that it is invalid to be used as a bill of divorce and that it nevertheless disqualifies the woman who receives it from marrying a priest. And similarly, where the sages taught an invalid chalitza, which is used when a man dies, having not had a child, and he leaves a brother, and now his widow and his brother have an obligation to marry, right, and then perform yibum, so that their first child will be the heir of the man who died, or they choose not to marry, they perform the ritual of chalitza. Until they perform yibum or chalitza, she can't go marry anyone else. A man could marry someone else because he could have multiple wives. That ended 1,000 years ago, but before that, he could have multiple wives. But she would not be at liberty to marry anyone until she either performs yibum and then later a divorce, or chalitza, so she goes free. And a woman who has performed chalitza with her yavam, right, with her brother-in-law, is like a divorcee in that she is disqualified from marrying a priest, right? So Shmuel says an invalid bill of divorce means that she's not divorced and nevertheless disqualified from marrying a priest. And similarly, where the sages taught an invalid chalitza, it indicates both that the chalitza is invalid, so she still has a yibum, a yibum bond with her brother-in-law, and nevertheless she is disqualified. She disqualifies the yavama from entering into yibum with other brothers in the West, in the land of Israel, as opposed to in Bavel. They said, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, if chalitza was performed on the left foot of the yavam or at night, these acts of chalitza are invalid, and they nevertheless disqualify the Yavama from entering into Yibum with the other brothers. What are you talking about the left? Because the ritual of Chalitza is she takes the sandal off of his right foot, and I think spits and says, this is a man who will not build up the house of his brother. It's kind of a ritualized thing, but at any rate, the Chalitza has to be done properly, or if it's an invalid Chalitza. However, if the Yavam, the brother-in-law, was a minor, or if the Yavama, the widow, performed Chalitza while he was wearing a soft shoe made of cloth and not the shoe used for Chalitza, then these acts of Chalitza are invalid, and in these cases, they do not disqualify her from entering into Yibum with one of the other brothers. That's what I've got for us today, so I can give the warning. But let's go to some questions or comments. Questions or comments on Gittin 24. Sharon, it appears that there needs to be very specific intention when writing the get. Is that intended to force the husband to have very specific focus and perhaps reconsider? That's a great question, Sharon, because we've seen that why is it so that it has to be written for her sake? Well, because the Torah says so. You're looking, like Rambam would suggest we do, for an underlying reason, right? An underlying rationale from the Holy One above of why he would want that a get be very specifically intended for this wife. And I like what you're saying. I like what you're saying, Sharon. It should not be so quick or easy to create a divorce, particularly under traditional law where the husband has the unilateral right to instigate the divorce, that he should have to think carefully about it, right? He should actually absolutely have to think carefully about it and not just willy-nilly do it. And along the same lines, that's where the sages decreed the ketubah, right? And that at the time of getting married, he becomes contractually obligated that if he ever divorces her, he's going to have to pay good money. Joseph, does the woman need to read and understand fully the writing of the get when she receives it before she is divorced? I mean, they definitely read it to her and they definitely give it to her. I think what you're asking is, what if she's a minor? Then it has to be given to her father. What if she's an imbecile, right? She's incapable of understanding what happened. Well, then she shouldn't have been married in the first place. What if she became an imbecile while she was married? Now the husband wants to divorce her. Not a great guy, right? But let's say she became mentally incapacitated and halakhically disqualified. Can she receive a divorce? That is an excellent question. I don't know the answer offhand. I'm pretty sure we are going to encounter that question before we finish this tractate. So hold on to your seats. That's what I've got for us today. Tomorrow night after Shabbos ends, we're pretty much at the latest Shabbats of the year. I think next week it might be the very latest. So I'll try to get on the air as early as possible. It's probably going to be about 9:30 p.m. LA time. And then Sunday, not the regular time, Sunday's class for, page 26, that'll be at noon Pacific on Sunday. Regular time Saturday night, noon Pacific on Sunday, because our son is graduating high school on Sunday. Have a great Shabbos, my holy sisters.